Bad franchises make bad decisions, and that's why they stay bad for so long. And it feels like that's exactly what we have here with the New York Jets. The Jets are 2-4, and owner Woody Johnson has already panic-fired head coach Robert Saleh. So naturally, with a struggling team and a quarterback who turns 41 this season, the Jets decided to go out and trade for a wide receiver who turns 32 this year and is making a ton of money. I honestly can't say it makes a ton of sense. I mean, sure, Aaron Rodgers wants to be reunited with Davante Adams, and they were just so good playing together back in their time in Green Bay. But this just isn't a good move for the future of the franchise at all. The Jets are playing with fire, and this is a decision that can come back and hurt them a lot if it doesn't all work out. If it weren't for the Cleveland Browns being by far the dumbest franchise in all of sports, the Jets might have a shot to be the biggest joke of a franchise in the NFL. Most teams who make that big trade for an aging player who's making a lot of money are typically, in theory, contenders. There is no possible way that you could have watched the Jets over the past 6 weeks to start the season and think that they are contenders. They were supposed to be with Aaron Rodgers coming in, but they just haven't been. And instead of admitting that, it just hasn't worked out, the Jets instead panicked and traded for Davante Adams as a last-ditch effort to save their season. The morning after the Jets lost to the Bills 23-20 in Week 6 to fall to 2-4, and just over a week after Woody Johnson fired Robert Saleh, the Jets made a blockbuster trade by sending a conditional third-round pick to the Raiders for Davante Adams. Now, that pick could turn into a second-round pick if Davante is a first or second-team All-Pro this season, or if he's on a roster for an AFC Championship or Super Bowl. The thing that matters most here is most definitely the contract. The Raiders wanted to trade Davante to someone who would take on his entire deal, and the Jets did, but then they immediately restructured his contract. His cap number is now just $3.21 million for this season, and there are now 2 voidable seasons on the deal. So essentially, he just needs to figure out what his future looks like after this season. And if Rodgers ends up retiring, I wouldn't be too surprised if this is just a one-and-done type of deal for him. That definitely makes it an easier pill to swallow, especially if the money isn't going to hurt them in the long run. So the question then becomes, is it worth a third-round pick to see if the Jets can actually turn it around with Davante Adams? Well, that does seem a lot more fair. If anything, the Jets also probably do hope that that pick turns into a second-round pick, because then this trade clearly worked out for the best. But honestly, I doubt it. The Rodgers experience is coming to a close fast. At least it feels like it. So this might also just be the last actual chance the Jets have to see how far Aaron Rodgers can take them. It's a little more complicated considering they don't actually have a head coach, and instead it's Jeff Ulbrich as the interim, but let's be real, Aaron Rodgers was already calling a lot of the shots, and it only makes sense to let him do it again. Rodgers was traded to the Jets before the 2023 season, and since, he's brought in some familiar faces. Nathaniel Hackett is obviously the big one. He came to New York to be the offensive coordinator after he spent a couple years as the OC back in Green Bay, where he was there for those back-to-back Aaron Rodgers MVP seasons. Now, of course, as we all know, he was a complete train wreck with the Broncos and doesn't exactly get the benefit of the doubt anymore. He is no longer calling the plays, and it's actually the passing game coordinator and quarterbacks coach, Todd Downing. And that really just all comes back to just how bad the offense was running under Hackett. But he is a Rodgers guy, so that's probably why he's there. Then Allen Lazard is a big player for sure. He isn't exactly known for being able to get a lot of separation on his routes, but that's one of Rodgers' guys. And he already has 354 yards and 4 touchdowns this season. That really is his guy, which is hilarious when you also have Garrett Wilson on the roster, who is a truly elite young wide receiver. Last season, the Jets did have Randall Cobb. He retired after the season and quite literally did nothing with the Jets, but he did come over with Rodgers and played with him a long time in Green Bay. And now we get to add Davante Adams to the list of former Packers to join Aaron Rodgers in New York. And it feels like it's been a long time coming. Davante wanted out of Green Bay and left to play with his college quarterback, Derek Carr. Carr ended up struggling, and he got the boot from Las Vegas, so he really didn't get to play with him too long. And clearly, Davante was annoyed with just how bad everything got after Carr left. He hadn't been playing for the Raiders because of a hamstring injury, but I don't think that was fooling anyone. He wanted out of Vegas, and now his wish has finally come true. And there's no doubt that he is still a very good NFL wide receiver. Davante Adams has 209 yards and 1 touchdown coming into New York, but he has gone for 4 straight 1,000-yard seasons, and if it weren't for being 3 yards short in 12 games, games in 2019, it'd be 6 straight. He is a fantastic player and the real deal, and the Jets could definitely use him to help improve the offense. But how much does one player really make a difference? I think with Davante Adams coming to the Jets as such a decorated veteran, he'll probably just automatically be the wide receiver 1 over Garrett Wilson. But either way, those two are really good weapons to have. There were some pretty big expectations for the Jets offense this season with Rodgers actually playing, and they definitely haven't lived up to them. Garrett Wilson truly just has been nothing short of a disappointment playing with Aaron Rodgers. He is the wide receiver 1, but it really hasn't been anything too crazy. He's had 399 yards and 3 touchdowns. Really not too far behind Allen Lazard. The other top wide receiver was supposed to be Mike Williams, but it doesn't feel like he's going to be on the roster for too much longer. For one, he hasn't been very efficient at all. He has 10 receptions on the year for 145 yards, and he only signed a 1-year deal, which essentially was a prove-it deal, and it just hasn't gone well. He tore his ACL last year, but he was a very reliable receiver for the Chargers for a while. But all that doesn't matter. In that loss to the Bills, the late drive that the Jets had did end with an interception on a pass to Williams, and Rodgers really didn't seem to mind throwing him under the bus after the game. He basically said that he just didn't run the right route, and Rodgers definitely did look pissed after the play. Williams is still on the roster right now, but I wouldn't bet on it being for too much longer, and he definitely isn't even a top 3 wide receiver on the team anymore now that Davante Adams is on the roster. Now on top of it all, it certainly doesn't help that the offensive line just isn't very good this season, and Breece Hall hasn't been overwhelmingly good in the run game like we had somewhat expected. He's rushed for 310 yards and 2 touchdowns, but has been pretty useful in the pass game with 204 yards and a touchdown. On the outside looking in, the Jets have a lot of good players and super good weapons, but for some reason, it just all isn't coming together. There are plenty of people who we could probably put the blame on for all of this, but I think the long ownership of the Johnson family is where we can put a lot of that blame. They bought the team back in 2000, and it's been a lot of suffering since. Now, there were definitely some good times in there. I mean, not many fans get to see their team play in back-to-back conference championship games, but the Jets never did win or get to the Super Bowl. Their second AFC title game was in 2010, where they lost to the Steelers. And since then, since 2010, the Jets have not made the playoffs a single time. They've had a single winning season since back in 2015 and went 10-6, but even then, they still missed the playoffs. That is 13 years without making the playoffs. The NFL does have their fair share of long-suffering fan bases that haven't won a playoff game in a long time, like Washington or Miami, but damn, I mean, they've at least been to the playoffs. To not even make the postseason in a stretch that long is just insane. Rex Ryan had some good success in New York, but then just couldn't return to the playoffs late in his tenure. Then it was Todd Bowles who got a shot, and he just couldn't replicate his year 1 success. Then the disaster that was Adam Gase came in and essentially blew everything up, and then it was Robert Saleh. A pretty quick era that's already over just like that. Aaron Rodgers was supposed to be the savior for the New York Jets, the same way that Tom Brady was for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, but it just hasn't worked out in the slightest. We're probably watching the end of Aaron Rodgers' career, but who knows? Maybe Davante Adams can help save whatever the Jets do have left in the tank, but I wouldn't bet on it.